I was wrong about everything. Every single assumption I'd made over the past 6 months came crashing down in a single moment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because what happened that October night changed everything I thought I knew about my family. My name is Thomas Crawford. I'm 70 years old, and until recently, I worked as a nurse at County General for 43 years. I say until recently, because what I'm about to tell you forced me into early retirement. Some people might think that's a bad thing, but honestly, after what I discovered, I needed the time to heal. Not physically, though there was plenty of that too, but emotionally. I live in a modest two-story house in suburban Portland, Oregon. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, paid off after decades of work. The house sits on about half an acre, surrounded by oak trees that turn brilliant shades of red and gold every fall. I bought it back in 1982, right after my wife Eleanor passed away from breast cancer. Our daughter Sarah was only 5 then. I raised her in this house as a single father, working double shifts to make ends meet, determined to give her everything she needed. Sarah grew up to be beautiful, smart, and ambitious. She married a man named Mark Bennett when she was 26. Mark seemed decent enough at first, a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. They had a son, Alex, who became the absolute light of my life. But Alex came into this world under difficult circumstances. When he was just 3 years old, there was a terrible car accident. Sarah was driving, not paying attention, ran a red light, and another car T-boned them on Alex's side. Alex survived, but barely. He spent 2 months in the hospital. The doctors said he had severe spinal damage. They told us he'd likely never walk again, that he was paralyzed from the waist down. He was only 3 years old, and his life was already defined by a wheelchair. As a nurse, I knew the prognosis, and it broke my heart. But Alex was a fighter. He adapted to his wheelchair, learned to navigate the world from that seated position, and never once complained. At least, not that I ever heard. For 6 years, I watched my grandson grow up in that chair. I helped modify my house with ramps, widened doorways, installed grab bars in the bathroom. Every other weekend, Sarah and Mark would drop him off for what they called grandpa time. I treasured those visits. Alex was quiet, almost eerily so, but I attributed it to his condition. I figured the trauma of the accident and the limitations of his disability had made him withdrawn. He communicated mostly through nods and head shakes, occasionally wrote things down on a notepad I kept for him. I never questioned it. I was his grandfather, his caretaker during those visits, and I accepted him exactly as he was. But I should have questioned more. I should have wondered why a 9-year-old boy who'd been through speech therapy and who showed no cognitive impairment would choose silence. I should have noticed the fear in his eyes sometimes, the way he'd flinch when Sarah's name came up, or how he'd grip his wheelchair armrests until his knuckles turned white whenever they came to pick him up. I didn't see it, or maybe I didn't want to see it. The real story begins on October 15th. It was a Friday evening, and Sarah called me around 6 o'clock. She sounded cheerful, almost too cheerful, which should have been my first warning sign. Sarah had been distant lately, always stressed about money, snapping at me whenever I offered to help financially. But that evening, her voice was light and airy. "Hey, Dad, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just finished my shift." "What's going on?" "Well, Mark and I have this amazing opportunity. His company is sending him to a conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, and they're covering everything, including a spouse. It's our 10th wedding anniversary next week. So we thought, why not make it a little vacation? You know we never get time alone." "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for them. "You two deserve a break." "The thing is, Dad, it's next week. We'd be leaving Monday afternoon and coming back the following Sunday. 9 days total, and we were hoping you could watch Alex." I didn't hesitate. "Of course. You know I love having him here." "You're sure? I know it's a lot to ask." 9 days is a long time. "Sarah, he's my grandson. It's not a burden, it's a blessing. Bring him over Sunday night, get him settled, and you two enjoy yourselves." There was a pause on the other end. Then she said, "Thanks, Dad. You're the best. I don't know what we'd do without you." Something in her voice made my skin prickle, but I pushed the feeling down. I told myself I was being paranoid, that years of working in emergency rooms had made me see danger where there was none. Sunday evening came, and Sarah and Mark pulled into my driveway in their silver SUV. I watched from the kitchen window as Mark lifted Alex out of the back seat and set him in his wheelchair. Alex was wearing a blue hoodie and jeans, his dark hair falling across his forehead. He looked small in that chair, fragile, and my heart ached the way it always did when I saw him. Sarah came in carrying a large duffel bag with Alex's clothes and supplies. Mark wheeled Alex up the ramp and into the living room. "Here we are," Sarah said brightly. Too brightly. "Alex, you're going to have such a great time with Grandpa, aren't you?" Alex nodded, his face expressionless. Mark crouched down next to the wheelchair. "You be good for your grandpa, okay, buddy? We'll call to check in." He ruffled Alex's hair, but there was something mechanical about the gesture, something that felt rehearsed. Sarah went through the usual list of instructions. What time Alex went to bed, what he liked to eat, his medications. That last part was new. "Medications?" I asked. "Since when is he on medication?" "Oh, just some supplements," Sarah said quickly. "Vitamin D, calcium, stuff to help with his bone density since he's not weight-bearing. They're in the side pocket of his bag. Make sure he takes one of each with breakfast every morning." I nodded, making a mental note. As a nurse, I knew about bone health in wheelchair-bound patients, but something about the way she said it felt off. Too casual, too dismissive. They left 20 minutes later. Sarah hugged me goodbye, held on just a fraction too long, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. I mean it." Then they were gone. Alex and I sat in the living room for a while, watching TV. Or rather, I watched while he stared at the screen without really seeing it. Around 8:30, I asked if he wanted to head upstairs to the guest room I'd set up for him. He nodded. I'd installed a stair lift years ago, right after the accident, so Alex could access the second floor. I helped him transfer from his wheelchair to the lift, and we rode up together. His room was at the end of the hall, painted a soft blue, with sports posters on the walls and a bookshelf full of chapter books I'd been collecting for him. I helped him get ready for bed, made sure he was comfortable, and said goodnight. As I turned to leave, I noticed his hand reaching out toward me, fingers trembling slightly. But when I looked back, he'd pulled it back, tucked it under the covers. "You okay, Alex?" He nodded. "Good night, buddy." I closed the door and headed to my own room across the hall. I took my evening medications, insulin for my type 2 diabetes that I'd been managing for 15 years, blood pressure pills, and a statin for cholesterol. I kept them all organized in a pill organizer on my nightstand. I'd refilled my insulin pen just last week, a brand new one that should last me a month. I injected my usual dose, 40 units, and settled into bed with a book. I was reading a Tom Clancy novel, something to take my mind off the long week ahead. But I kept thinking about Alex, about the sadness in his eyes, about how silent he'd been. Around midnight, I woke up to use the bathroom. As I passed Alex's room, I noticed his door was slightly ajar. I peeked in, expecting to see him asleep, but instead, I found his bed empty. My heart jumped. Where was he? Then I saw movement near the doorway. Alex was on the floor, pulling himself toward the hallway using just his arms, dragging his supposedly paralyzed legs behind him. My first instinct was panic, worry that he'd fallen and hurt himself. But then I noticed something that made me freeze. His legs weren't dragging limply. They were bent at the knees. His feet were pushing against the carpet, propelling him forward. Alex was crawling. I stood there in shock, unable to process what I was seeing. The boy who hadn't walked in 6 years, who'd been told by every doctor that he'd never walk again, was crawling down my hallway in the middle of the night. He looked up and saw me standing there. Our eyes met, and I saw something I'd never seen in them before. Terror. "Alex?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. He froze, his whole body going rigid. Then, slowly, he sat up. Not the awkward, upper-body-only sitting of a paraplegic, but a normal, full-body movement that engaged his core and his legs. "Grandpa," he whispered back. His voice was clear, strong, nothing like the rare mumbles I'd heard from him before. "Please don't tell them. Please." "Tell them what?" "Alex, what's going on? Can you feel your legs?" "I've always been able to feel my legs," he said, and there were tears running down his face now. "I've been able to walk since I was 5. Mom made me pretend." The room tilted. I reached out to steady myself against the doorframe. "What?" "I need to tell you something," he said urgently. That's why I came to your room. I heard them talking before we left. Mom and her boyfriend. Boyfriend? Alex, what are you talking about? Mom has a boyfriend. His name is Derek. He comes over when Dad is traveling. They've been planning something, Grandpa. Something bad. I moved into the hallway, sank down to sit against the wall, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Keep talking. I heard them 3 days ago. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard voices downstairs. I crawled out of my room. I sat at the top of the stairs and listened. Mom was talking to Derek on the phone. She said, 9 days is plenty of time. The insulin will do its job, and they'll think it's just diabetic complications. Old people die from that all the time. My blood ran cold. The insulin. I looked down at my hands, thinking about the injection I'd just taken a few hours ago. She said she's been putting something in it, Alex continued, his voice shaking. Every time she comes to visit, she does something to your insulin. She said you've been getting sicker and sicker, and nobody suspects anything because you're diabetic anyway. I thought back over the past 6 months, the unexplained dizzy spells, the fatigue that my doctor couldn't account for, the 2 trips to the emergency room for hypoglycemic episodes that shouldn't have happened given my careful management. I'd attributed it all to age, to my body becoming less predictable. But it wasn't age. It was my daughter. My own daughter was poisoning me. Why? I managed to ask. Why would she do this? The house, Alex said. She needs money. Derek has gambling debts, really bad ones. Mom told him that once you're gone, she inherits everything. The house is worth $500,000. She said they could pay off all the debts and still have enough to start over somewhere else. And Mark? Her husband? Your father? He's not my real dad, Alex said quietly. My real dad was someone else. Mom got pregnant before she met Mark. She lied to him, told him I was premature. Mark doesn't know. She told me once, when she was really angry at me, that I ruined her life. That's why she made me pretend to be paralyzed. Made you pretend? Alex, I don't understand. After the accident, I was in the hospital for a long time. The doctors said I might have nerve damage, that I might not walk, but I did get better. When I was 4, almost 5, I could walk again. The therapists were so happy. But Mom wasn't. She got really quiet, really angry. He paused, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his pajamas. One night, she came into my room at the hospital. She told me that if I ever walked again, if I ever told anyone I could walk, she'd make sure something really bad happened to me. She said she'd make sure I really did become paralyzed, that she'd push me down the stairs or hurt me in a way that couldn't be fixed. I was 5 years old, Grandpa. I believed her. I felt sick. This was worse than the poisoning, worse than the betrayal. This was child abuse of the cruelest kind. So you've been pretending for 4 years? 4.5. I'm 9 now. I've pretended every single day. At school, they think I'm paralyzed. My teachers, my friends, everyone. Mom pulled me out of regular school after 1st grade and put me in homeschool. She said it was because of my special needs. But really, she just wanted to control me more. She's the one who homeschools me. Dad works all the time, so he doesn't know. Why didn't you tell someone? A doctor? A teacher before she pulled you out of school? I was scared. I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of what she's doing to you. When I heard her talking about the insulin, I knew I had to tell you. Even if she hurts me later, I couldn't let her kill you. This 9-year-old boy, who'd been living in fear for half his life, was willing to risk everything to save me. I pulled him into a hug, and he clung to me, his small body shaking with sobs. You're safe now, I told him. I promise you, you're safe, and we're going to fix this. But even as I said it, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. The insulin I'd taken before bed. How much poison had I already injected into my body? Alex, I need you to do something for me. Can you walk? He nodded against my shoulder. I need you to go to the bathroom and get my phone. It's charging on the counter. Can you do that? He pulled back, wiped his face, and stood up. Stood up, on 2 fully functional legs. He walked down the hallway with a slight limp, probably from 4 years of disuse and muscle atrophy, but he walked. He came back with my phone, and I immediately dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? My name is Thomas Crawford. I'm a diabetic, and I believe I've been poisoned. I need an ambulance immediately. I also need police. My daughter has been tampering with my insulin, and I have evidence. The dispatcher kept me on the line, asked for my address, asked what symptoms I was experiencing. I told her about the dizziness, the racing heart I was starting to feel, the confusion creeping in at the edges of my mind. Sir, the ambulance is 7 minutes out. Stay on the line with me. I looked at Alex, standing there in his pajamas, looking more like a regular 9-year-old than he had in years. There's a child here, I told the dispatcher. My grandson. He's been abused. He needs protection. Officers are en route as well, sir. Can you tell me about the child? I explained, my words getting slower as the dizziness increased. Alex took the phone from me, and I heard him talking to the dispatcher, his voice clear and steady, giving details I couldn't manage anymore. The next few hours were a blur. The paramedics arrived, started an IV, checked my blood sugar, which was dangerously low despite the insulin I'd taken. They loaded me into the ambulance. I insisted Alex come with me, refused to let him out of my sight. The police were there too, taking initial statements, photographing my insulin pen, bagging it as evidence. At the hospital, they stabilized me. A toxicology screen revealed not just insulin, but traces of additional hypoglycemic agents, drugs that would force my blood sugar down even further. Someone had been systematically adding medication to my insulin over an extended period, creating a slow, steady decline that would eventually lead to a fatal hypoglycemic event. Detective Maria Santos from the Portland Police Department came to interview me the next morning. I was in a hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, with Alex asleep in a chair next to me. I'd refused to let them take him to child services until I could ensure his safety. I told her everything. Alex woke up halfway through and corroborated my story, adding details I didn't know. He told her about Derek Holloway, Sarah's boyfriend, a man with a criminal record for fraud and a gambling addiction that had left him owing money to dangerous people. Alex told her about the insurance fraud, too. Sarah had been collecting disability payments for Alex for years, money that was supposed to go toward his care but that she'd been pocketing. She'd even gotten a substantial settlement from the car accident, money intended for Alex's medical needs, all based on the premise that he was permanently disabled. Detective Santos listened, took notes, and made calls. Within 24 hours, she had enough for a warrant. Sarah and Mark were arrested at the Phoenix airport when they landed on their return flight. They'd tried to act surprised, concerned about my sudden health crisis that they'd been notified about. But when confronted with the evidence, Sarah crumbled. She didn't confess immediately, but Derek did, facing charges as an accessory to attempted murder. He gave up everything. The plan, the timeline, even showed police the text messages between him and Sarah, where they'd discussed the best ways to cause a fatal diabetic emergency. They'd researched insulin overdose, hypoglycemic shock, how to make it look like natural causes. Sarah had been adding glipizide, a medication used to lower blood sugar, to my insulin for 6 months. Every visit, she'd tamper with it, adding just enough to cause symptoms, but not enough to kill me immediately. She wanted it to look like my diabetes was simply becoming harder to control, that I was deteriorating naturally. The plan was for the final 9 days, while they were conveniently out of state, to administer a fatal dose that would send me into irreversible hypoglycemic shock. The evidence was overwhelming. The tampered insulin pen had her fingerprints. Derek's phone had internet searches for how long does insulin poisoning take and undetectable ways to cause diabetic death. They'd even discussed what to do with my house after I was gone, where they'd move, how they'd split the money. As for Alex, Child Protective Services became involved, but I fought for him. I contacted a family lawyer, presented evidence of my fitness as a guardian, and proved that I was his best option. Mark, devastated by his wife's betrayal and the revelation about Alex's true father, voluntarily signed over his parental rights. He'd believed for 9 years that Alex was his son, had loved him despite the supposed disability, and learning the truth destroyed him. But he did one good thing. He testified against Sarah. The trial was difficult. Sitting in that courtroom, watching my daughter try to defend the indefensible, broke something in me. But it also crystallized something else. Sarah wasn't the girl I'd raised, or maybe she was, and I'd simply never seen the darkness in her. The prosecution painted a picture of greed, of a woman who'd been resentful of her father since childhood, who'd felt entitled to his resources. They showed how she'd psychologically tortured her own son to maintain a fraud that funded her lifestyle. They demonstrated how she'd cold-bloodedly planned to murder her father for an inheritance. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Sarah Bennett was found guilty on multiple counts: attempted murder, child abuse, fraud, insurance fraud. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 15. Derek Holloway got 18 years as an accessory. Mark Bennett testified as a witness for the prosecution and wasn't charged with anything. He genuinely had no idea about any of it. The court found that he'd been as much a victim of Sarah's deception as anyone. After the trial, he moved to California, too heartbroken to stay in Oregon. He sends Alex birthday cards and Christmas presents, but he hasn't been able to face seeing him in person. I understand. Every time he looks at Alex, he sees the lie his entire marriage was built on. Alex and I started therapy together. He had years of trauma to work through, years of living in fear, of suppressing his true self, of being threatened into silence. But he's resilient. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. It took months of physical therapy for Alex to walk normally again. 4 years of pretending to be paralyzed had weakened his legs, atrophied muscles that should have been developing. But he worked hard, pushed through the pain, and by his 10th birthday, he was running. I'll never forget the first time I saw him run. We were in the park near my house, just walking along the path, and he saw a dog, a golden retriever puppy. Without thinking, without the learned behavior of 4 years of restraint, he took off running toward it. His gait was uneven, still rebuilding strength, but he was running. I stood there and cried. We had to deal with the legal fallout of the insurance fraud. The disability payments had to be returned, the settlement from the accident as well, since it had been awarded under false pretenses. It created a financial burden, but I didn't care. I had my grandson, really had him, maybe for the first time ever. We also tracked down Alex's biological father. Through DNA testing and some investigation, we found him living in Seattle. His name was David Chen, and he'd had a brief relationship with Sarah in college. He'd never known about Alex. Sarah had simply disappeared, blocked his number, and moved on. David was shocked, overwhelmed, but not unkind. He was married now, with 2 daughters, but he wanted to know Alex. We arranged supervised visits at first, then gradually built a relationship. Alex now has a biological father who actually wants him in his life, who treats him with kindness and patience. David's wife, Lisa, has been wonderful too. She welcomed Alex into their family without hesitation. For me, the physical recovery took time. The months of poisoning had done damage to my kidneys, my liver, my cardiovascular system. I had to retire from nursing, couldn't maintain the demanding schedule anymore. But retirement turned out to be a blessing. It gave me time to be the grandfather Alex needed, to help him heal. To heal myself, I sold my house. Too many bad memories, too much association with Sarah's betrayal. Alex and I moved to a smaller place closer to his new school, a regular school where he's making friends, playing sports, living the life of a normal 10-year-old. We talk about Sarah sometimes. Alex asks questions about her, about why she did what she did, whether she ever loved him. I don't have good answers. I tell him that people are complicated, that sometimes mental illness and greed and desperation twist people into versions of themselves that are unrecognizable. I don't excuse what she did, but I try to help him understand that her actions weren't his fault. He goes to therapy twice a week. I go once a week. We're both learning to live with what happened, to process the trauma, to move forward. Last month, I got a letter from Sarah. She's in the Oregon State Penitentiary, won't be eligible for parole until 2040. The letter was full of apologies, of explanations, of justifications. She blamed Derek, blamed her financial stress, blamed her difficult childhood as a single-parent kid. She asked for forgiveness. I haven't responded. I don't know if I ever will, but I did show the letter to Alex, because he deserves to make his own decisions about his mother. He read it, was quiet for a long time, then said something that broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. She says she's sorry, but she's only sorry she got caught. If you had died, if I hadn't told you, she'd have gotten away with it. She'd have taken the money and never looked back. That's not really being sorry. He's 9 years old and wiser than most adults I know. We're okay now, Alex and I. We're more than okay. We have movie nights and game nights. He's teaching me how to play Fortnite, and I'm teaching him how to cook. He's on a youth soccer team, still building his leg strength but determined. His coach says he has natural talent, that with time and practice, he could be really good. I watch him play sometimes, running across that field with the other kids, laughing and shouting and just being a kid, and I think about how close we came to losing this. How close I came to dying without ever knowing the truth, without ever seeing him really live. I think about all those years he spent in that wheelchair, silent and afraid, pretending to be someone he wasn't. And I think about the courage it took for him to crawl to my room that night, to risk everything to save me. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry, if I hate Sarah for what she did. The truth is, I don't know. Some days I am angry, furious at the waste of it all, at the pain she caused. Other days, I'm just sad. Sad for the daughter I thought I had. Sad for the years Alex lost. Sad for the family we could have been. But mostly, I'm grateful. Grateful that Alex found the strength to speak up. Grateful that I survived. Grateful for second chances. For the opportunity to be the grandfather Alex deserves. For the life we're building together. Last week, Alex came home from school excited about a project. They're doing family trees in his class, and he wanted my help. We sat at the kitchen table with poster board and markers, mapping out our family. He put himself in the center, drew lines to me, to David and Lisa and his half-sisters in Seattle, even to Mark in California. He hesitated over Sarah's name, the marker hovering over the paper. Should I include her? He asked. That's up to you, buddy. She's your mother, biologically. But family is also about the people who show up for you, who love you, who keep you safe. He thought about it, then wrote her name in small letters, off to the side. Present but not prominent. Acknowledged but not celebrated. That feels right, he said. And it did. We're not a conventional family, Alex and I. We're a 70-year-old retired nurse and a 10-year-old boy who've both been through trauma and come out the other side. We're two people who were betrayed by someone we loved and who chose to build something new from the wreckage. But we're family. Real family. The kind that matters. I look at him now, growing taller every day, getting stronger, becoming more confident, and I see unlimited potential. He wants to be a doctor someday. Wants to help people the way the doctors helped him after the accident, the way I helped save his life by believing him that night. I tell him he can be anything he wants to be, because the boy who spent 4 years pretending to be paralyzed, who found the courage to walk again, who saved his grandfather's life, can accomplish anything. And I'll be there, every step of the way, to make sure he knows he's loved, he's safe, and he's never, ever alone. That's my promise to him. That's my promise to myself. We survived. And now, we're learning to thrive.